Howdy folks, it's Zach, and welcome back to my Star Wars Tips and Tricks section. And today we're talking about the newest post from Star Wars The Old Republic, which is called Content Roadmap for 2017. Now I know what you're thinking, because I was thinking it too. Content Roadmap for 2017? Are we already in 2017? Isn't that the kind of announcement you do, like the State of the Union at the start of the year? If that's what you're thinking, I was thinking it too. I was like, this is kind of an odd timing for this. But this actually is very indicative of what the devs are trying to do from here until the rest of the year. And if you read through the entire post, it's all the way at the bottom. A lot of what the devs are talking about are trying to let the players know that there's kind of a new initiative out to have more player feedback and more communication with the players. So we'll get there eventually, but I did want to talk about this post because I thought this was a really, really good opportunity to help encourage you guys not just to play the game, but to also get involved. And the best way to do that is always to figure out what the devs are up to and how to get some really good, authentic, practical communication going as a dialogue between ourselves as players and the devs. So first things up, the content roadmap for 2017. Is it saying anything that you've never heard of before? Maybe. There's actually a few new announcements in there, and there's a few things in there that we already knew was coming. So let's go ahead and let's start at the top. We'll work our way through. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible and the commentary down to a minimum so you guys get the facts and the whole truth and nothing but the facts. we'll get there eventually. All right, so first up and foremost, I think the first announcement was about gameplay direction. And this is kind of interesting because the last two major expansions we had were Knights of the Eternal Throne and Knights of the Fallen Empire, and both of those were story-driven content expansions. So I think one of the first questions most people have when it comes to what is BioWare doing next, that's one of the first things that comes to mind. Are we going to see more of the same, or are we going to start seeing some different things? So in the announcement, the first thing they talk about is gameplay direction, and they want to let players know that they are still committed towards finishing up and getting out more raid bosses. Now, they are very specific about this. They do mention that their goal is to finish off the current raid so that every few months a new boss comes out to be challenging players, but there's no word about whether there's going to be more operations in total. Operations are notoriously tricky to build and design because let's just face it, guys, players are talented. The players who do raiding all the time, they're the ones who get the most excited about doing a raid, and they're the ones who are constantly practicing raids. They do all the ones in the game currently over and over and over again, and when a new raid comes out, they chew through it so damn fast. I got to experience this for myself, by being a raider and just seeing how raiders are in the PTS. The public test server. I can't really talk about what I saw there or what I did, because that's part of the NDA. But what I can safely say, without a doubt in my mind, is this is the case with every MMO. Is you have a lot of players who play the end game content, they do it repeatedly, they're good at it, and then when new end game content comes out, they are ready to annihilate it, and they usually go through it very fast. So I can see why, as far as extending the game life of a game, investing into raids doesn't always feel like the best option for a dev, and why there was like such a long streak there, why they just made old raids and flashpoints just harder and gave better rewards that came out of there, because it's really tough to invent something that's totally new, that's going to satisfy gamers, that's going to have a right level of challenge for everybody involved, from the beginner to the hardcore raider. And when you have raiders just chewing through content so damn fast, it makes it difficult to make a top-end curve, because who's testing it? Probably the guys who are interested in the PTR. Who is testing in the PTR? Probably the guys who, chew through raid content pretty quick, and that means they're probably talented and motivated. And is that still the same kind of player you're going to get? Is that the player you want to have when you think of your casual players? It's a tough balance. So there is good news. There are more raid bosses coming out to finish off, the war on Iakath and follow past Tith in the operation. There's no new word on new operations really. The other thing that they did want to mention is they wanted to reiterate how they made the tiered gear easier to get in operations, and I actually don't mind repeating that as well. I thought that was actually one of the best changes of the most recent patches, and that left it so that CXP was not your only way to get good raid gear. and or crafting. That it brought down the price. It lets you have CXP as just kind of a bonus as you're earning it. Maybe you get something cool, awesome. If not, you don't have to bank on that anymore. You can just go in and raid. So if you're a hardcore raider, you're still in luck. That's still a great way to get gear. If you're a new raider and you don't have any gear yet, totally cool, man. Jump into a story mode raid and start getting it. Go after it. Have fun. Have a great time. You don't have to grind CXP points just to get gear now, which is, they put that in there, and I still think that's a good reminder. That was definitely something that I think appeased a lot of folks. Also, they wanted to mention, and this is the next category, which is player versus player, or as we affectionately call it, PvP. And they are making a few changes in PvP, so guys, I would buckle down and get ready. Here's the thing. If you're focusing in on raiding and appeasing the raiders, typically it's the PvPers who are crying out like, hey, well, where's the new PvP content? And so designers will usually flip around and they'll do a ton of PvP content, and then it leaves the raiders going, hey, where's our raiding content? We want raids. So there's really no way to appease all the players about everything all the time. And what's really interesting in this particular communique is they do kind of go across the board and list a little bit of everything. They're trying to let every player know that they're trying to do at least a little something for them, and I think that's actually pretty good. So what are we talking about when we talk about PvP? Well, first up, class balance. Oh goodness, isn't that always the hot button issue when it comes to PvP? You can make a stun for a tank in this game and make it so that, if for one particular raid there's some ad that needs to be tanked or stunned or whatever, but then all of a sudden you take that same move into PvP and you find some player who gets stun locked for like 10 seconds, and that's enough to completely annihilate them all the time. And then all of a sudden you have a team of people running around using that same character class, just stun locking people just so they can just murderize them. These are how these kind of problems start. There's always something in the game that may be balanced fairly well for PvE and then ends up being completely overpowered in PvP. Or something they tweaked for PvP purposes, like healing, and changing the way the healing works in the game, that now all of a sudden affects your PvE. So there's no really good way around that. So the announcement that comes from BioWare on this is that they are going to be tweaking classes, guys. Not every class. There's a few that aren't affected, and by a few, I really just mean one, and that's basically Jedi Knights and Sith Warriors. They're really the only ones who seem to get a pass on this round of on these rounds of changes. Everybody else looks like they're going to get tweaked a bit. They don't say how in this particular announcement, but those updates will be coming up. So guys, if you play anything as a main other than a Sith Warrior or a Jedi Knight, just be ready. Your class is going to change a little bit. I shouldn't even use the words a little bit. They don't mention how much they're going to tweak on these different characters. I would assume, because it's not a big expansion, they did announce 5.2, they did announce 5.3, 5.3 and 5.4, but it usually is a very large expansion, something like a 6.0 that would warrant a ton of deep-rooted class changes and new class abilities and level caps and such. This really looks like if they're going to tweak something at this stage of the game, in between expansions, it's probably something that's just a little out of whack. And so they're probably going to tweak like one or two moves or the concept behind a particular move, and hopefully just leave it at that. Also, when it comes to PvP, they did mention that they are looking to make unassembled components a legacy currency. So this is really good news for a lot of PvP peers. If you PvP on a lot of different characters, it's still not quite as good as a universal currency for all your tunes all shared at the same time. That's something Guild Wars 2 does. Like, if I earn gold on my engineer, that goes into a big pot and all my characters have access to it at all times. And a lot of the specialty currency, if I go into a particular we call them flashpoints in Star Wars, but if I go into a flashpoint in Guild Wars 2 and I earn a currency that earns an armor set from there, then I could buy that armor on any one of my characters. They all have access to that special currency as well. So I'm a big fan of that. I really feel like that really values players' time quite a bit, because that means any character you spend time on, you can then redirect those funds immediately to another alt, especially one that maybe needs a lot of gear or needs some love, or maybe that you like even more or use in a raid. Maybe you PvP a lot on a DPS class, but you really need gear on your tanking class. Who knows? So we're not getting quite there yet, but it's inching over into better directions. So unassembled components will be a legacy currency, and this will allow you to play with any of your alternate characters while gaining benefits across your entire legacy. That's the way they worded it. We'll have to see how that actually goes into play to see all the nitty gritty little effects. Also, I'd mention that they did say that they're going to include a new war zone by the end of the year. Fancy McSfancy. And they're also going to go ahead and tweak Galactic Starfighter. I happen to like Galactic Starfighter. However, I didn't find it to be the deepest experience I've had in the game, and not one that pulled me back to it very often. But I love space fighting sims, and the maps at the time when it was released, they had two really, really good maps that were really fun to play. That was a blast. It was a real hoot. I wanted to see it take off and do more. In fact, I actually wanted to see the game engine for Galactic Starfighter turn into something that we could use more often in the game, to where you used to have these like little space fights in the old Knights of the Old Republic game, where you'd be flying from planet to planet and suddenly get attacked in space and you have to shoot down other ships. I loved that. It kind of broke up and kind of kept you on your toes when you travel from planet to planet. But in this game, I always want to see like a raid built around the Galactic Starfighter engine. It's such a cool little engine inside of the game, but you don't really get rewards in Galactic Starfighter that apply to your characters outside of the ship you use for Galactic Starfighter. And I would love to see little tweaks like that. It would make Galactic Starfighter even more fun to do, and maybe an extra map or two. That'd be great. Just more incentives basically to hop in there. They're also going to change ranked PvP a little bit. They're going to give earlier notification of Season 9 rewards, and continued review and adjustment, of course, of class balances, which we already talked about. All right, so let's move on into story and companions. Now, here's where things kind of get interesting. They mentioned that they're going to do more story content. However, it looks like it's going to be something akin to what they did on iCath, maybe not quite as big. So for the next little mini expansion coming out, they're going to do not Shadow of Umbra, Crisis on Umbara. I gotta say this right, Umbara. Crisis on Umbara, and this is gonna have a new flashpoint. Awesome, and it looks like we're gonna bring back some of our old companions. They don't mention which ones. They just say, we know bringing back your old companions is extremely important, so expect to see more of them returning throughout the year. Now, you guys can do some of the math on this. If it's a character we haven't seen yet, that has to be in the pool of characters they can pull from. Which one will they pick? I don't know. But the ones I'm still kind of rooting for are people like Kira, Nadia, Jaisa, the ones that we really haven't seen since two expansions back, and they were love interests. That's kind of a big step. I think more often than not they've leaned a little bit away from more of the popular force using love interests. I would love to see them come back. They don't mention which ones here will come back, but they do mention that they are going to bring up a few more. So because we have a new story expansion, I don't know if they're going to tie them together like they did in War of Ialcath and people like Alara Dorn, or if they're just going to be a static, run to this person, start this quest, find said person, do said task, have this person now as companion, and if they were romance before, they have a few extra lines of dialogue. I don't know. I think it's actually just kind of good news that they haven't forgotten about those companions, and I think it's really just a reminder that they haven't forgotten about them and that they are still looking to do things with them. Also, interestingly enough, characters like all the characters from Knights of the Fallen Empire. So this is Theron, Lana, Koth, and Senya, the four of the new characters, I should say, that we got in those two expansions. You will now be able to customize them. This they did put specifically for them. They also added Shea Vizsla into that. I'm not exactly sure why. I've always been able to throw armor on my Shea Vizslas. So for me, she's always been customizable. What it could mean, and this is where the kind of question mark is for me, since they listed all 5 of these names, I don't know if this means you can put armor on every specific slot for the character. So, head, chest, hands, belt, etc. Or if it just means that for Theron, Lana, Shay, Koth, and Senya, they're going to have that the companion customization look change, where they actually change like the race, hair, tattoos, etc. As you know, the vanilla characters, the vanilla companions, all had most of them had multiple options, like, and they were numbered: companion customization 1, or Shay, not Shay, Kira Carson companion customization 1 through, and then they would have like 8 different options. And if you picked one, it might make her into a blonde, it might make her look like Jason, it might make her look like all these different things. So I don't know if the new customizations that they're talking about are those, or if it just means that, hey, cool, now you can throw armor on Theron like you couldn't do before and make him look, however you want. That, either way, you're getting some type of customization of this character you didn't have before. That's kind of cool. I hope it's the armor more than a customized look, but that's just me. There's a lot of players out there who romance Lana Beniko. She was the default love interest from 60 plus if you didn't play the vanilla game. So I totally understand if you guys, want a different look for her, maybe different eyes, hair, whatever. We shall see, but it is in the works. It is coming. Also, like I said, they're going to add, as far as story, a new flashpoint. I don't know if it's going to be directly tied into whatever the story is for Umbara, but they are releasing it on that same patch, and it is a flashpoint. Yay! I like flashpoints. Uprisings can be cool. They're pretty short. They're pretty high intensity if you pick a high mode and you have good people. But I can admit, I do like the stories. I do like the original flashpoints. It's been a long time since we've had a new one, and I don't mind getting a new one. That's just, I'm on the record saying it now. You've heard it. I've weighed in. Moving on. All right. Next up, the next announcement they had is about quality of life. And this is actually kind of a big one, guys. Not because it's such a big announcement, but just because so many little bugs get picked on by players all the time. And I've heard players say, like, why haven't they fixed this since launch? This is such a little thing. Why hasn't this ever been done? And this was BioWare's way of saying, like, hey, look, these things actually do matter to us. And we want you to know they matter to us, and we want you to know that these things are coming up. Plus, here's some of the things that we're already doing. So some of the things that they're talking about that they are trying to do on their end are fixing quote-unquote long-standing bugs. Not sure which. They don't name them by name. Hopefully those will come out in future patch notes. Changes to existing game systems. Improvements to the user interface. I'm actually kind of a big fan of that. They recently streamlined the user interface to try to add more of a drop-down menu feel in the game. In some ways that works really well. In some ways it's kind of annoying. I still think there's some ways, maybe hopefully we can optimize it, so that's actually kind of a cool note. That is a quality of life note I do like. Also, increasing the speed of mounts. Yes! Very in favor of that. Very, very, very in favor of that. In my opinion, you cannot have mounts move fast enough. The game was designed originally in the vanilla aspects of it for you to run around and do basically every quest on a planet to get to the level that you needed to leave it, and then you'd move on and you do the same on the next planet. That's a lot of running around, and a lot of the stories in these planets, even if you just do the stories and you are using your quick travel like a demon and you have the lowest cooldowns on it and you have your fleet passes with no cooldowns on it, even with all of that, you still are going to find yourself having to cover a lot of blank territory. If you don't believe me, go to Tatooine and just drive to your next objective, and you'll just see it's a big flat open desert. That's what Tatooine is. And so a faster mount in my book, even if it's like 10-20%, and you go from the current percentages to that's helpful. Speed counts. I'm a big fan of that. Also, even running back in certain raids and flashpoints back to your spot, having a faster mount, I'm totally in favor of that. Huge. That's like, thank you, BioWare. I love it. They also want to add more legacy perks. I don't know how I feel about that. It depends on what the perk is. There's some legacy perks that I think have a lot of value, like rocket boots. You unlock that. That goes across every character you have or ever will make. That is a fantastic investment of, in your legacy, and one I recommend to everybody. But then there's things like boosted XP. That's character specific. It can get kind of expensive. Does it really help your character? Debatable. If you have the credits for it, maybe you want to go for it. So it really depends on what kind of legacy perks they're looking to add. Also, they also said they wanted to offer more customization improvements towards weapon tuning enhancements. I think that'd be kind of neat. They don't say what kind of customizations, as in making current ones slightly better, or if that means they're going to make more weapon customizations, maybe a little cheaper. Maybe there's some that you can get. They don't really say. They just say that they're going to enhance them to player collections. That's actually kind of cool. That does mean that if you buy one, you can unlock it in collection and then have it on all your characters. That would actually be a really great change. So they said we'll continue to seek your feedback on customization options you would like to see. So guys, when they do mention like, hey, do you feel like this weapon tuning should be legacy unlockable? Say yes. just say yes, and all your fellow players will love you for it. All right. Next up, they go into the section what they call the Summer of SWTOR, which is kind of the release schedule. The next two patches. I'll go through this section a little quicker. So for June 13th. That's the next patch. That is Game Update 5.2.2. And this has the Nar Shaddaa Nightlife event returning. I do recommend doing this. I do recommend doing it carefully. This is a gambling style event. You go to Nar Shaddaa, you gamble on casino machines, you hopefully get particular tokens that you then use to trade in for gear. There's one piece of gear there I recommend to everybody, and that is the autocannon. It's only usable by the mercs, or not, excuse me, not the mercs, the commandos. Thank you. It's only usable by commandos, but it's like the must-have commando gun, in my opinion. It looks very cool. If you don't believe me, look up the Nightlife event, look up the autocannon. It's awesome. It has a really cool effect as you unsling it off your back. It's kind of like a tri-point head that opens up and lets you start blasting. It's very cool. So if you are interested in the Nightlife event, I do recommend going and at least getting that as a legacy item, because I don't know when Nightlife is going to come back. And sometimes things like the Gree event or what's it called? Gree or Rackle, those come pretty frequently. This one, you don't see it as often. So that's June 13th, guys. Take advantage of it. In that same patch, they're going to go ahead and do some Starfighter improvements, increase the requisition gains, and then make the gunship and bomber available by default. That's kind of nice. I like the gunship. Companion influence will now then be able to be earned through crew skill missions. Very cool, especially if you're a guy who likes to save money and not have to buy, $500,000 credit, companion gifts. And companion experience legacy perk for alts. This is kind of interesting. Once one of your characters reaches command rank 300, that's kind of high, you can acquire a new legacy perk to increase CXP gains on all your other characters. So guys, this is really more of a benefit if you already have a really high CXP rank. Then you can go ahead and invest into a perk that then lets you go ahead and gain experience on alternate tunes. Okay, that's kind of cool. I wish that would happen automatically anyway. That's just my opinion. Just because all game time you're playing, regardless of what character you're on, is game time that you play. I'd like to see it apply into like a pot formation, kind of like they do in Guild Wars 2. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Also, with 5.2.2, you're going to be able to craft Tier 4 armor. So if you're a raider and a crafter, or just a raider who are looking for your next piece of gear in Tier 4, good news for you. Both Theron Shan and Shea Vizsla, this is going to be the patch where their appearances can now be customized. Doesn't say how, again. It's not geared. Doesn't know if it's a gear or a customization slot item. I don't know. Legacy perks, mount speed, yay! You can go up all the way up to 130% speed. So there's two different perks, 120, 130. That's awesome. And then Tier 1 gear can be purchased with command tokens. Coming up in July, this is the Sisters of Carnage patch. This one is going to see the release of the second raid encounter. That's Avila and Esni. That's currently being tested in the PTR. And then also you're going to see a new stronghold. So if you guys are into decorating strongholds, you're going to get one that now has an ocean view. Kind of cool. We don't know what it looks like yet. Keep your eyes peeled. And this is also where the class changes are going to start. So they're going to do class changes for Sorcerer and Sage, Power Tech Vanguard. Basically, it's everything but Jedi Knight and Sith Warrior. So just kind of keep your eyes open for that. If you are one of those, you are basically free to go. And I think I'm missing one other one: Sorcerer, Sage, Power Tech Vanguard, Assassin Shadow, Sniper, Gunslinger. Or if you are a Marauder or Jedi Sentinel. If you're a Jedi Sentinel or Marauder, you're clear. So if you're a Jedi Knight, congratulations. Or a Sith Warrior, you're good. Either spec of that. Okay, then next up, 5.4, Crisis on Umbara. They've only mentioned two things about this. One, the story will continue with the new Flashpoint. It's going to come out in 5.4. And the appearances for additional companions can be customized. There will be more for that patch. They just haven't released it yet. So, guys, what do you want to take away from this? The very last note they have on that announcement is about player communication. And it really comes down to this, is the devs saying they're going to post things on the forum and they want us to respond to those ideas. And as long as we do this in a respectful way, a really good dialogue can form here. And I've seen them do this before. I can't mention how or where. I've signed non-disclosure agreements to say that. I can't actually reveal any details. But what I can say is that the devs, they do roll out the red carpet when it comes to these opportunities. They do listen to thoughtful posts, and they do really appreciate player feedback in a big way. I know, guys, it sometimes feels like the devs aren't listening, but if you put it, if you put yourself in their shoes and you see the volume that they have to deal with all the time, it is hard to narrow down, especially when the priorities from the top of the food chain are coming down at them. So, guys, just be aware. The more information you give them, that's more power they're going to have. Keep your eyes glued to the forums. Keep your eyes glued to Dolphy.net and see what is getting posted. And then be vocal about what changes you'd like to see. If they say, hey, we're thinking about changing the sniper class to have more damage on series of shots. Okay. If you're a sniper like me, I might weigh in and say, I think that's a great idea, and somebody else might say, from the PvP aspect, series of shots is overpowered. Don't do that. That'll kill us all. Both are valid points. We'll both put them in, and the more information we give the devs, the more power they have to make a decision, okay? And possibly your better argument towards your case may win over the devs. Think about that. Okay, that's a very important point. If you have the ability to back up your claim with numbers per se on a particular issue, like, hey, here's how I've noticed this kind of damage going out in this kind of raid against this kind of boss, and I have the recordings and the statistics to prove it, and this is why I feel like this, character class needs to be tweaked, or something like that. I'm just kind of throwing something out of my butt here, but if you have something like that, man, they will ask you for those numbers, and they might make those changes for you guys. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, guys, I hope you're having a great time. I know this video went kind of long and I talked a lot, but there's a lot to unpack in this post. So there's a lot coming up over the summer. I hope you guys are having as much fun with the game as I am. And if you enjoy posts like this, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.